A collar signal goes still in the Alberta foothills. When the biologist reaches the coordinates, she finds a young female grizzly dragged off the game trail, partly covered in spruce needles and dirt, killed in the way bears cache food. She measures the wounds. The bite marks span the neck. The claw rakes are deeper than any wolf could leave. No wolf scat within a wide radius. No cougar tracks. No bullet. No snare. No bait. Nothing else touched the carcass. The wounds are not from a wolf. Whatever killed this grizzly was another grizzly, and it was much bigger. Within hours, the site is cordoned. Provincial biologists photograph the drag path, the spruce cover, the shape of the wound pattern. The collar is still transmitting temperature data from inside the carcass. She had been alive that morning. The first assumption is the obvious one: a pack. Wolves are the only large predator that operates in this valley in numbers, and northern wolves have been recorded harassing grizzlies at kills for as long as biologists have been watching them. But packs leave signs: scat, multiple track sets, a cache pattern that looks nothing like this one. There were no wolves here. The Foothills Research Institute Grizzly Bear Program has been collaring bears in this region for decades under the long direction of Gordon Stenhouse. Its mortality database is among the most complete in North America. What that record shows, once you strip out the loud categories, trains, trucks, hunters, kills in defense of property, is a quieter one that keeps appearing in the paperwork with almost no public attention. Bears killed by bears. For years, this was small enough to be treated as anecdotal. A stray infanticide, a rare fight over a carcass. Then the collar data began to tighten. GPS points overlapping. Mortality signals inside the ranges of specific known adult males. Necropsies with the same signature, bite spacing consistent with a large bear, deep parallel claw rakes, prey handled and cached the way a grizzly caches an elk. Not every case fits. Some carcasses were too decomposed to read. Some were probably scavenged after death by an unrelated cause. But once forensic standards were applied, a pattern held that was too consistent to keep filing under other. The main non-human predator of the grizzly bear in Canada is, in most confirmed cases, the grizzly bear. To understand why that lands as strange, it helps to remember where this species stands legally. In Alberta, the grizzly has been listed as threatened since 2010, with a provincial population estimated at roughly 1,000 adults. Federally, Ecological lists the western population as special concern. These are not thriving animals. They are recovering, slowly, inside a landscape carved apart by highways, seismic lines, forestry roads, and rail corridors. The recovery plan assumes every additional mortality has to be weighed against a fragile baseline, which is why an internal predator matters. If bears are dying to bears at rates comparable to some human causes, the recovery math changes. The mechanism is not new to science. It is called intraspecific predation, and in brown bears it takes two overlapping forms. The first is sexually selected infanticide, a large adult male moving into or through a female's home range in spring, kills unrelated cubs. The mother, no longer nursing, returns to estrus within weeks. He may then attempt to breed her. It is brutal, and it is well documented. Long-term work in southeast British Columbia, including Bruce McClelland's multi-decade study in the Flathead Valley, has tracked this behavior across generations. In some populations, more than half of the cubs are lost before their second summer. Katmai has recorded cub survival around 34%, Yellowstone roughly 49%. The dynamics are not evenly distributed. Populations with dense adult male overlap tend to see higher cub loss. Where males range farther apart, mothers have room to den at elevation to stay above the risk. Females routinely choose steeper, higher terrain than males during the cub rearing years, a pattern researchers have documented as spatial avoidance, not coincidence. When human infrastructure eats into the low country, that vertical separation becomes harder to maintain. The second form is direct predation on subadults and, occasionally, on adults. Younger dispersing bears, forced out by their mothers and looking for a home range of their own, cross into the territory of a resident male and lose. That is almost certainly what happened on the game trail in the foothills. The female was young. She had a collar because she had recently gone independent. Her range was still forming when it collided with someone else's. None of this is folklore. It sits in the peer-reviewed literature and in agency mortality summaries. What is new or newly visible is the resolution. GPS collars, DNA from saliva swabs at wound sites, and hair caught in the debris of a cache have started to identify not just the species of the killer, but the individual. A 2026 Canadian study of released orphan grizzlies reported that roughly 1 in 3 of the natural mortalities in that cohort was intraspecific predation. That is not a rounding error. There is a competing theory, and it deserves airing before it is set aside. Wolves. Every few years, a video surfaces from Yellowstone or the Rockies of a wolf pack surrounding a bear. The clips are dramatic and easy to misread. What the National Park Service and long-term researchers like Doug Smith describe is a different picture. Encounters happen. They are usually about food. In the vast majority of documented cases, when a grizzly wants a carcass, the wolves yield. Cub mortality from wolves has been recorded, but it is rare, and it almost always involves unattended cubs. An adult grizzly killed by wolves in North America is a real event and a very unusual one. So wolves are a factor, they are not the factor. Now, the geography starts to matter. The eastern slopes of the Rockies, from the Bow Valley south to the international border, are the strongest grizzly landscape in Alberta. The foothills hold moist forest, ridges, water, and prey. Deer, elk, wolf-killed carrion, moth aggregations in scree, and, further west, salmon streams inside British Columbia. On paper, the land can feed a lot of bears. On the ground, it is a lattice. Highway 3 cuts east to west through the Crow's Nest Pass. Highway 93 runs the spine. The Canadian Pacific Rail Line follows the bow through Banff, where at least 17 grizzlies were killed by trains between 2000 and 2017. Forestry roads add another layer of exposure. Long-term Alberta modeling has shown that subadult bears, exactly the dispersing animals, are the class most vulnerable to road-based mortality, and that there is a threshold road density above which populations cannot hold themselves stable, no matter how good the forest is. This is where the paradox sharpens. Protected land concentrates bears. Roads and rails punch through the same land. A dispersing subadult searching for open range must move through both the human corridor and the resident male's territory. The forest is deep enough to hide her for days. It is not wide enough to let her disappear from another bear that has already claimed it. The strongest evidence in the file is not the young female on the game trail. It is the accumulating record of individually identified adult males, GPS collared for years across the Alberta and BC ranges, whose home ranges consistently overlap the ranges of females who then lost cubs. When those disappearances have been investigated, hair and tissue at some sites have returned DNA, matching known males. The pattern is not one dramatic kill. It is a slow, repeating signal, recorded across seasons, across landscapes, tied to specific animals. That evidence does something specific. It proves that intraspecific predation in Canadian grizzlies is not a rumor, not a rare pathology, and not something biologists have to reconstruct from a pile of bones. It is a measurable, individual-level force operating inside a population Canada has spent 30 years trying to recover. For the biologists working these systems, it changes the felt weight of every mortality signal. A collar goes silent, and the field team packs out expecting another road strike or another shooting. What they find, more often now than the old assumptions suggested, is bear on bear. It is not a tragedy in the way a poached carcass is a tragedy. It is a functioning ecosystem doing what functioning ecosystems have done for hundreds of thousands of years. One we are only starting to see clearly because the collars record the moment the animal stops moving. It does not prove that every unexplained grizzly mortality is the work of another bear. Some are still wolves, some are still poachers, some are still trains. Bear 143, a young mother well known to researchers in Banff, killed on the CP tracks in 2018 along with her 2 cubs, is a reminder that the biggest killer of Canadian grizzlies has not changed. We are still the leading cause. Human hands, driving, shooting, laying steel. But the internal predator is real, and it is now well enough documented that recovery planning has to account for it. High cub mortality is not necessarily a sign of collapse. In stable, unhunted brown bear populations, it may simply be the ceiling the species has always lived under, one that human management can respect or accidentally worsen by squeezing bears into smaller and smaller pieces of secure range. Weeks later, someone from the program returns to the site in the foothills. The carcass is gone, worked over by ravens and coyotes and the weathering of a Chinook winter. The collar is recovered. A single set of grizzly tracks crosses the forestry road below the ridge, moving south. They do not belong to the female. They are too wide. The land can carry another grizzly through here. It cannot promise she will pass alone. One bear killed another. The species keeps moving.